Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video we're looking at some injury updates, some waiver updates, a small trade again we saw over the past couple of days, plus some trade rumors involving the Blackhawks, the Penguins, the Oilers, the Blue Jackets, and the Vancouver Canucks. And with all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Before beginning this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. We're now to the you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and leave a comment down in the comment section below so this I'll discuss in today's video. So I would usually start off these videos by talking about some signings from our past couple of days. Unfortunately, there have been no signings from our past few days, so we're going to start today's video off by looking at some injuries from over the past couple of days. Lots of intriguing injury updates from our past few days, so we'll get this thing started here in New York. As the Islanders, Noah Dobson left Monday's game with a lower body injury, and it's going to be out for an indefinite period of time, so it's a horrible blow there for the Islanders to see Dobson be out for an extended period of time, and he might be out for a couple of weeks, maybe out for a couple of months. I don't exactly know at this point in time, but Dobson will be out for a long period of time. Boston's Marcus Stelic, who did not finish Monday's game against the San Jose Sharks, was placed in injury reserve with an undisclosed injury, and he'll miss at least next week for the Boston Bruins, so it's a bad blow there for the Bruins to lose their fourth line center again due to injury. Ottawa's Zach McEwen has taken an indefinite leave of absence from the Ottawa Senators, so it's for personal reasons. Not going to get into all of that, but McEwen has left the team, and the Sens will be without Zach McEwen for the next little while. Well, David Perron is expected to be activated off of injury reserve and return to game action on Thursday for the first time in over 2 months. So that's a really big boost there for the Senators to get David Perron back. He was a big offseason acquisition, but hasn't really gone to much NHL action this year due to injuries and stuff like that. So good to see that Perron is going to be activated, and hopefully he'll provide a big offensive boost for the Ottawa Senators. Well, Josh Norris will miss the next 3 games at least, as he's dealing with the upper body injury. So it's a bad blow there for the Senators to see Norris, who's been a solid second line center for that team, be out for any significant period of time, and hopefully he's only going to miss those 3 games and isn't going to be longer. Vegas' Cole Schwind is out week to week with a lower body injury, so Schwind will miss at least the next couple of weeks after suffering an injury in one of the most recent games for Vegas. While Brett Howden is questionable for the next game for the Golden Knights with the illness, so he may be able to play in the next game, but he's currently dealing with the illness, so it's going to be up in the air until that next Vegas game, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. Nashville's Cole Smith was activated for injury reserve and returned to game action after missing 11 games with lower body injuries, so Smith is a decent bottom 6 forward to get back in the lineup. It's a very good thing there for the Predators, so really good stuff there for Nashville. Well, Nikolai Kovalenko in San Jose, who had missed 6 games with upper body injury, returned to game action on Tuesday, so it's a big boost there for the Sharks. Kovalenko's been really well as a top 9 forward ever since being acquired from Colorado, so really good boost there for the Sharks to see Kovalenko be back in the top 9. Then we saw the Toronto Maple Leafs Max Pacioretty, who suffered an upper body injury over on Saturday's game, be placed in injury reserve and may miss a little bit of time, so he might be out for a couple of weeks. That could be a bad blow there for the Leafs. So there's a solid top 9 forward like Max Pacioretty for the next little while. For Brock McGinn, he has undergone ACL surgery and will be out 7 to 9 months, so McGinn's season is over. A bad blow there for the Ducks. While Trevor Zegras, who had missed 6 weeks after undergoing a knee procedure, was active for injury reserve and returned to game action on Tuesday. So really great news to see Zegras get back. That's a big boost to that team's top 6. But McGinn, who has been dealing with injuries over the past couple of years, is going to be out for a long period of time again. So bad blow there for Anaheim. Colorado's Val Nichushkin suffered a setback from his lower body injury and is now out week to week. So a bad blow there for Nichushkin as he continues to suffer with a lower body injury. It's going to keep him out for another couple of weeks. Well, Miles Wood is expected to return from his upper body injury at some point next week. So that could be a really big boost there for the Avalanche to see Wood be back at some point next week. He's been in and out of the lineup this year due to injuries too, so that could be a really big boost there for Colorado. Minnesota's Jared Spurgeon, who had missed 3 games with a lower body injury, and Kirill Kaprizov, who had missed 12 games with a groin injury, are both expected to be activated and return to game action on Thursday. So it's going to be huge boosts there for Minnesota to see Kaprizov, who's their best player, and Spurgeon, who's a solid top 4 right shot defenseman, both return to game action for the Wild, and those could be huge boosts to that roster. So really good stuff there for Minnesota. Winnipeg's Adam Lowry missed Wednesday's game and is out week to week with an upper body injury and has been placed on injury reserve. So there's a babble there for the Jets to lose their captain. Mason Appleton was activated for injury reserve and returned to game action on Wednesday, as was Hayden Fleury. He was activated as well and returned to game action on Wednesday after Fleury missed nearly a month with a knee injury and Appleton missed 3 weeks with a lower body injury. injury, so both have been out for quite some time, but a solid third pair defenseman and third line forward. Good to see those two guys get back into the lineup for the Jets, but bad news to see the captain and Adam Lowry go down with an injury. Columbus has Cole Sillinger, missed Wednesday's game with an upper body injury and is currently day-to-day. So there's a bad blow there for the Jackets to see a young second or third line center get injured, and hopefully he won't be out for an overly long period of time. While lastly, Vancouver's Noah Juleson was placed in injury reserve after missing a few games with undisclosed injuries. So Juleson will be out for probably at least a couple more games, but it's a bad blow there for the Canucks as they have yet another defenseman out for the next little while. So some interesting injury updates from the past couple of days. Good to see guys like Appleton, Kaprizov, Zegras, and Perron all return to game action and get back into the lineup. Well, it's bad news to see guys like Dobson, Norris, Nichushkin, and Lowry all suffer injuries, and hopefully they won't be out for an overly long period of time, but some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Next, going over to one waiver update we've seen from our past couple of days. There was only one waiver update. It's not an overly significant one, as the Calgary Flames, who had called up Walker Duehr a couple of weeks ago, were getting a little bit healthier, so they wanted to send him back down to the AHL, so they placed him on waivers. So that was the only waiver placement that was back over on Tuesday, I think it was. They placed him on waivers. I thought he probably would have cleared, given the fact he's more of an AHLer at this point, although he does have bottom six experience at the NHL level, so they thought if a team was in desperate need of a bottom six forward, there's a possibility someone could claim him, and one did, and the San Jose Sharks wound up putting in a claim for Walker Duehr. So it's an interesting pickup there for the Sharks. Duehr, like I said, could be a decent bottom six forward for a couple of teams, and on a lower end Sharks team, I think he could fit in really well as like a fourth line forward. So that's an interesting pickup there. So the San Jose Sharks definitely see something in Duehr that obviously the Flames didn't, and maybe he can work out really well as like a solid bottom six forward in San Jose. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but Duehr was placed in waivers at Calgary, with Calgary getting a little bit healthier, and was claimed by San Jose Sharks, and will now be in the lineup for the Sharks as like a bottom six forward. So interesting note there, but that was the only waiver that we saw from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a small trade we saw from over the past few days. This was an interesting one between two of the California teams that made an interesting player swap, as the Anaheim Ducks sent young prospect forward Pavol Regenda to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for depth forward Justin Bailey. So it's an interesting swap there. For the Ducks side, it's a little bit perplexing because Regenda's on the younger side of things. He's a couple of years younger than Bailey and has shown flashes at the NHL level. So it's a bit surprising that they dealt him, but they get Justin Bailey back. He's on a one-year deal with an AAV of $800,000, so he'll be a UFA at the end of the contract. Bailey has been basically bouncing between the AHL and NHL over the past couple of years. Last year, played in 16 AHL games, putting up 6 goals and 11 points, and also played in 59 NHL games last year for San Jose, putting up 5 goals and 14 points. This year, has only played in the AHL, putting up 7 goals and 14 points in 33 games. He's a very productive AHL player, can be a call-up option if need be. If the Ducks are into some injuries, like we just said with Brock McGinn, and they need some bottom six help, Bailey could definitely step in as of right now and produce that. So interesting pickup there, but the Ducks get pending UFA forward Justin Bailey to finish out this season with him on their contract. Well, for the San Jose Sharks to get the younger Pavol Regenda, he's also on a one-year deal with AAV of $775,000, so you do get a little bit of cap relief there. Regenda is only 25 years old, whereas Bailey is 29. Last year, Regenda split time between the NHL and AHL, playing 5 NHL games, putting up no points, where he had 19 goals and 34 points in 54 AHL games, so he had a really good showing at the AHL level. So far this year, has 4 goals and 16 points in 36 games with the AHL affiliate for the Anaheim Ducks, and has also gone to 1 game with the AHL affiliate for San Jose, putting up no points. So I think Regenda has a future of like a solid bottom six forward, maybe a fourth or third line guy. I think this could be a really good pickup there long term for the Sharks. Might not help them right now. I think he's more of an AHL player at this point in time, but in a couple of years' time, maybe he works out as like a solid bottom six forward. So it's an interesting player swap as the San Jose Sharks deal Justin Bailey to Anaheim and get Pavol Regenda in exchange. I think at this point, the Sharks doing this deal because I think Regenda does have more of an upside than Bailey does, but we'll see what happens in a couple of years' time when we look back at this trade. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but an interesting swap between the San Jose Sharks and the Anaheim Ducks. That was the only trade I wanted to discuss here today. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So going over to a couple of trade rumors, got a couple of things to talk about here. First, we're going to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks recently. I think it was an article that they were doing. Chris Johnston, one of the other people on The Athletic, was talking about the Chicago Blackhawks and said that there's a very likely chance that Philip Kurashev's time in Chicago is now limited. It sounds like, according to Johnston, that the Blackhawks are planning on moving on from Philip Kurashev, whether it's it's this year at some point before the trade deadline and try and give him a fresh start, or whether it's next year in the offseason. He says that the Hawks are planning on moving on from him. He's currently pending RFA, so there's a very likely chance with his qualifying offer really high that the Hawks don't really want to bring him back, so they could probably let him walk as a UFA, not qualify him as an RFA. If it got to that point, I think there's a possibility that if he gets into another situation, he could produce as like a solid third, maybe fourth line forward. He just hasn't really worked out this year in Chicago. I mean, I think it was either last year or the year prior. He had a fantastic season for Chicago, but he's been starting to get a little more of a demoted role, and this year he's not produced at the level that we've seen him over the past couple of years. So it's been a really bad stretch to the point where Kurashev's been healthy scratched a couple of times. It just seems like the Hawks don't see a future with Kurashev anymore, so it seems like it's a very likely possibility that he will not be qualified as UFA and will wind up signing somewhere else. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens there, but I don't know if it's gonna happen by a trade deadline or if it's maybe more of an off-season move, whether it be trading him or just not qualifying him. But Kurashev is expected to not be back with the Blackhawks next season, and whether that's being dealt at the deadline this year or being let go as an RFA or being dealt in the off-season, except the Hawks move on from Kurashev at some point. So definitely keep your eye on that, as that's a possibility that we have to watch out for over the next couple of weeks, bleeding on potentially into the off-season. Next, going over to the Edmonton Oilers. On the recent Insider Trading video, Pavol Regenda was talking about the Edmonton Oilers, and he said that even though the Edmonton Oilers recently just acquired John Klingberg, signed him as a UFA, there is a possibility the Oilers could still try and acquire one more defenseman before the trade deadline. Now, he says that it's not going to be a big-time player, like we've heard earlier in the year about them being linked to guys like Gavrikov or Anderson or Savard or some of those bigger-time forwards. But he says with the cap hit of Klingberg, plus them adding him to the blue line, there's a very likely chance that the Oilers won't go that big and try and make that big of an acquisition before a trade deadline. There's a very likely chance they'll try and move like a third or fourth round pick or a mid-level prospect or something like that to another team and try and get maybe more of a depth guy. Not exactly sure who they try and target at this point, but something tells me it'd be something similar to like what they got with Stetcher last year, where they gave up a fourth round pick and they acquired Troy Stetcher, who ended up being a solid depth addition there for that team. So it's still a possibility and very likely that we do see the Oilers make some sort of a move to acquire a blue liner before the trade deadline passes. It's just not going to be as big as a lot of people were expecting at the beginning of the season. So because of the Klingberg signing, because of all the money they still have tied up in their cap, expect the Oilers to make a smaller, lower end acquisition around the trade deadline when it comes to adding a defenseman, and don't expect it to be an overly huge addition. So definitely expect the Oilers to wind up acquiring a defenseman, but don't expect it to be anything more than a depth defenseman. So definitely that's all we're going to talk about with the Edmonton Oilers. Next, going over to the Pittsburgh Penguins. According to Chris Johnston, he was talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins on Insider Trading video recently, and he mentioned that there were a couple of players such as Crosby and Malkin who may not wind up getting dealt. He says besides those two guys, maybe a couple of those younger players, there's not really much on that Pittsburgh Penguins team that's untouchable right now. There's a very likely chance the Penguins could make multiple moves. He mentions that they want to try and move some of their older guys, so I guess would be guys like Raquel, Pedersen, and maybe a couple of those pending UFAs or guys who are on one-year deals. Try and move some of the older guys they have in their lineup for younger NHL players. He says, like we've heard before from Elliot Friedman, they value young NHL players who have already been established at the NHL level more than prospects or picks. If they can get prospects or picks, I think they will be open to doing that, but I think they would rather have young NHL players rather than prospects or picks. So definitely expect the Penguins to be busy. But one thing that Chris Johnston does say that's a misconception right now with all those trade rumors speculating between the Pittsburgh Penguins is that the Penguins are not currently at this point in time open to retaining salary at this point in time. He says that don't expect the Penguins to be retaining money on Karlsson to try and move him. Don't expect that to happen. The Penguins apparently only have one, I think, retention slot available at this point in time, and he says they're going to try and use it wisely. So don't expect the Penguins to go off retaining salary on guys like Raquel or Karlsson or things like that, but expect them to use that one retention slot wisely, and don't expect them to do a whole bunch of retention moves. But he does say that there are a lot of players available for the Penguins, and that as long as they can get some young NHL players, expect them to make some moves. So some interesting updates for Pittsburgh. But besides Crosby and Malkin, not really much untouchables, and expect them to try and target young NHL players and not really make any retention moves. So definitely interesting note there for Pittsburgh. And lastly, going over to the Vancouver Canucks, we have two things to talk about when it comes to Vancouver. First, when it comes to Vancouver Canucks and Brock Boeser, we heard some recent reporting from the Donnie and Daly show over in Vancouver, and they were saying that if Brock Boeser was to get moved, Columbus may be a team who has some major interest. He said the Jackets do value Brock Boeser and have some major interest in him, and they would have the cap as well as the assets to make that sort of a deal work. So we know that Boeser is an interesting name to watch out for. The Canucks are not in an overly great position. I think they're currently 2 or 3 points out of a playoff spot right now. They're not looking overly good, and if they fall hard enough out of a playoff spot, pending UFAs such as Boeser could be dealt if they don't have an extension in place. Now, I think they should really try and extend Boeser because he's been a fantastic piece to that Canucks team, but they don't want to let him walk as a UFA. So there is, I think, a possibility out there they could try and move Brock Boeser at some point. Now, if they do move him, what sort of return could they get? My guess would be like a first-round pick and maybe a really good prospect and probably an NHL level player. And the Jackets have all three of those. They have a boatload of NHL prospects. They have an extra first-round pick because they got that first-round pick from Minnesota in the David Jiricek deal, so they could try and flip that first-round pick if they're still in the playoff race. And they also do have a couple of really good young NHL players. So I think the Jackets could put together a deal good enough for Boeser. And if Boeser likes it enough in Columbus, I could see him stay in like maybe like a 2 to 4 year deal with the AV of like $7 to $8 million. I think the Jackets will be open to doing that sort of thing. And they have a lot of cap space, so they have the cap to make that work. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But according to Donnie and Daly, when they were talking about that, they said that it's not a guarantee that Boeser does get moved, but if the Canucks were to make Boeser available and he could get moved, expect the Jackets to be one of the front runners for him, and they could be a very likely landing spot. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. And lastly, when it comes to JT Miller, we talked about this in our last video about how Miller was almost traded to New York Rangers, but the deal fell through. Well, Pierre LeBrun on the Insider Trading video recently was talking about JT Miller, and he says a couple of things. One is that the Canucks have sort of shifted their asking price. Originally, they wanted sort of like a hockey deal, a center for a center. That's why Zibanejad's name came up. That's why a couple of other centers' names came up on potential trades. But now it sort of seems that they're open to taking a more future-based package. It seems that they'd be open to getting maybe more like prospects and picks rather than just going center for center. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there, but expect the Canucks to be more open to maybe making a sort of prospect and pick future-based package. And lastly, when it comes to the Canucks, he says that more teams are getting involved in the Miller sweepstakes. He says that the Devils and the Canes are also in the mix for Miller and could try and land him. And he says he wouldn't put it past Dallas with their newfound cap space to potentially try and add Miller as well, although that would be a little bit more complicated with the term on his deal for Dallas. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But definitely throw Jersey and Carolina into the JT Miller sweepstakes. Dallas is a potential third option as well. The Rangers are still in the mix, and expect the Canucks to be more open to accepting a future-based package instead of just a player-for-player swap in their JT Miller deal. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's what I want to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all of this down in the comment section below. What were your opinions on all of this? Do you think Miller gets dealt? Could the Rangers, Canes, Devils, or Stars be landing spots? And if so, could the Canucks get more of a future-based package instead of a player-for-player swap? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Do you think Boeser gets moved? And if so, could Columbus be a landing spot? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Do the Penguins move players? Who could they move? Is there still a possibility that Karlsson could be moved if they don't retain anyone on his contract? And if so, where could he go? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Which sort of a depth defenseman do you think the Oilers could try and target? Love to hear your thoughts on that. And does Kurashev get moved before trade deadline, or is it more of an off-season move? Definitely love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Plus the small trade, injury updates, and waiver update from our past couple days. Definitely love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. We're until the latest video. If you're interested, subscribe below. Thank you all your support. We know to have you guys. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Hopefully leave a comment in the comment section below so someone else gets today's video. Also a blog, talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. Leave a link in the description below. And can I see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.